Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle, and today we're going to talk about how to get a little more control back into your life. The combination of the virus and the shelter at home has taken a lot of the control that we had in our lives away. For example, maybe you commuted to work and now you're forced to work from home. Or maybe you lost your job entirely. Or if you're a coach like me, maybe some of your work has dried up. In addition, you can't go to the grocery store anytime you want, or you end up hanging out in long lines. And sometimes you can't get the things that you need. And this feels very frustrating. Now, of course, compared to other times in the history of this country, we still are extremely privileged. But that doesn't change the fact that the landscape has changed. We can't see our friends, except maybe on Zoom. We can't have that physical contact, which as human beings, we actually need to feel safe, to feel grounded, to feel comfortable. In addition, we've lost our future. That is, we don't know when this is going to end. We hope it's going to end soon. We hope we'll go back to normal. And yet I have a funny feeling that things are never going to be quite the same, because a certain innocence, a certain attitude of things continuing forever the way they are has been taken away. And we have to think about our lives and our behavior in a very different way. Now, in some ways, this is good. But in the moment, right now, it could be putting you on a roller coaster of emotions. Now, many times you may feel just fine. Things are okay. You're enjoying the extra peace. You're enjoying the lack of traffic when you have to go somewhere. Although you don't like those lines at the grocery store. And it's frustrating that you can't go to the movies or go to restaurants anymore. That you can't go to the library, right? That could be like, frustrating. So it brings up emotions. As a psychosocial analyst and grief coach for many years, I understand completely what happens and want to share some of what happens when we go through a significant loss. Loss triggers emotional responses in the body. They're part of our survival system, although much more advanced, thank you, and adapted than the survival system of, say, a lizard. It's more complex. So grief is part of our survival system. And the losses that we experience around the virus also affect our sense of safety, our sense of how things should be. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that there actually is a dangerous virus out there that could take you out, or at least make you really horribly sick for several weeks, which is not my idea of fun. So there's sort of this undercurrent, and it's so separate, and it's so at odds with the experience of what it's like to be outside, at least in California right now, where spring is just bursting out all over, and it seems odd to be stuck at home. So the emotions that come up, well, there may be fear around whether or not you're going to get sick, fear around whether somebody in your family might get sick, fear around maybe losing some of your friends, or there may be fear around your work, whether you're making enough money. Maybe some of your income or all of your income has stopped right now, and you're thinking, well, how am I going to get that going again? Are people going to want to start spending afterwards? Is this going to end, or is this a new normal? So there's fear. And then there is anger. Anger is one of our responses to when we are threatened when we feel threatened. And so, of course, the fear of losing our income could create that anger. And sometimes you feel like you want to blame somebody. Maybe you blame yourself. Maybe you blame your family members. And if you have family members at home, sometimes their being around can be really aggravating or frustrating. Sometimes you're very happy they're there, but other times maybe you've lost some of the privacy that you had before and you're having to share space. Maybe some of your children have moved home and so you have less privacy or space. Sometimes the emotion of desperation comes up. The fear gets so overwhelming that you feel desperate, that you have to figure out how to solve this right away. And you're tired of waiting. And so that's sort of the desperation reaction. As a culture, we tend to be taught to tamp down our emotions. In fact, if you look on Facebook, a lot of the advice and the free videos are all about how to calm you down. I take a different tact when it comes to emotions. I happen to believe that the most important thing to do with emotions is to release them, because they are actually a physiological experience, including chemical release in your body that enables your body to take some kind of action. And if you don't release those emotions, they get trapped in your body and they actually can have a damaging effect on your health. The other thing is that when you're in the grip of those emotions, and I'm telling you, they can really grip you. Anger, it can just totally take over your whole system. Or despair, it's like all the wind is taken out of your sails and you just don't know what to do next. Very, very powerful, these emotions. And they're meant to be, because they're part of your body's survival mechanism to force you to take action of some sort. So one thing that I have always told my grief clients is to delay action while you're in the grips of an emotion. The reason is that when you are in an emotional state, you're operating from the lower brainstem. It's the most primitive part of our brain. It's very instinctive and reactive. It's not the place to be making decisions. When you make a decision, it comes from an emotional response. And that's not always going to serve you in the long run. I'm sure you've had experiences of that in your life where you've, in anger, thrown something out or kicked somebody out of your house or said something really horrible to somebody. And that's from the lower brainstem. It comes from a defensive pattern. So what I teach my clients is how to release emotions in 2 minutes or less. I provide them with a skill and with a practice of what I call emotional hygiene. So we don't tamp down our emotions. And once you release your emotions, now you're in a position to start changing things. But there are 2 things to consider. One is the emotions and the other are the thoughts that are associated with the emotions. There's this loop between feelings and thoughts and thoughts and feelings. And your body actually believes your thoughts. So I want you to take a moment to take an inventory of your thoughts. If you are in that anger mode, that blame mode, you might go in one of 2 directions. You might blame yourself, and that tends to trigger that despair response. Or you might blame somebody else, blame the other, blame the world, blame the politicians, and you may even blame your family. And it's not your family's fault. I mean, certainly your spouse is not responsible for the virus. However, small things can trigger you because you are in a pressure cooker. This shelter in place is a pressure cooker. Now, the good news is this is a great opportunity to find out about yourself, to learn about yourself, not to escape with the usual busyness, not to escape with the usual distractions, but actually to examine and focus on things that are coming up. Because whatever's coming up is probably an area of weakness, an area that you would want to work on. So how can you restore control? Well, I've already indicated some of what you can do. You can first release the emotions. And if you want to know more about how to do that, you might want to check out the speaking event that I have coming up with the International Speakers Institute or Association, and there's going to be a link in the comment section. I'm going to be talking about being a leader and not a hero. And you're like, whoa, how does that have to relate to this? It relates a lot because it has to do with the patterns. Remember, I was talking about the emotional responses that we have. Do we blame ourselves or do we blame others? How do we react to the pressure cooker? Well, the response is a pattern that we developed in childhood a long, long time ago. Only a lot of those patterns are subconscious, and we never realize what they are until they burst out, until they just flow out fully formed. So this is an opportunity to find out what your patterns are and to actually start to work on them. And so one of those patterns is what I call pleasing. Pleasing is a pattern that we develop when we're in a family in which there's love but not enough to go around. And so you develop this pattern of pleasing to ensure that you get a certain amount of attention. And pleasing can kind of morph into different aspects, like being a performer, and that's the way in which you get attention. Or you may become a perfecter, like you constantly, depending on what is valued in your family, improve your education and amass awards and accomplishments and achievements. This is also a performer, but it's a little bit different than, say, being a rock star. But another pattern is the controller, and that person comes from a background in which the family situation is not safe. So their experience is that the universe is not safe and not to be trusted. And that's where the blaming comes from. Now, both the performer, the pleaser, and the controller can get into that blame of others, especially if the pleaser is not getting the response that she wants, the support that she is working towards. And both those patterns involve reaching out into the world to get what you need, as opposed to finding it in yourself. So what I had said before was, how do you get into control? You release the emotions. And if you learn the 2-minute exercise, you can get rid of them in 2 minutes or less. And this is really important to those of you out there who are like afraid of emotions. And let me tell you, I understand. For years, I tamped down my own emotions because as a 2-year-old, when my father was transferred, and I'm sure I screamed and ranted and raved, nothing happened. My mother was overwhelmed. She wasn't able to deal with me. And so I learned that practice of holding my emotions close for a long time. Now, I'm not afraid of my emotions anymore. Although I find myself sometimes holding them back because of the pattern. And that's what I work with, is the pattern. How to change the pattern over time. Because it actually requires you to develop new neural networks in your brain. New patterns. And when I worked on the Navajo reservation, I actually worked with court adjudicated and emotionally challenged Navajo teenagers, I had to develop program plans in which these children would learn incrementally how to change their behavior. So that is the experience, the tools that I bring to working with people. So the first is to release the emotions, to get control back. The second is to change what's going on in your mind. So if you're in that place of blaming either yourself, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I can't handle this, or you're blaming the outside world, oh, there are a bunch of crazy politicians, or my husband, if he would only change, if he would only treat me in a different way, life would be better, or if my children only respected my need for space. It's all, again, outside of yourself. And in both the pleaser, the self-blamer, or the other blamer, everything is put out of reach. You are disempowered. So the second step is to re-empower yourself, to change your thoughts to a place where you feel empowered. So when you blame other people, you are disempowered. When you look to yourself and say, well, what can I do differently? That's when you re-empower yourself. Now, I don't expect you to get this all at once, but that is basically the system that I use for people to re-empower them. I give them the tools, I give them the guidance and the instructions that give them success in their relationships, that give them success in their lives. And so then, when you're out of your lower brain stem and you're re-accessed your higher functioning brain, you can actually come up with new plans. So you want to break that loop of the emotional hijacking, the emotional sabotage that comes from being locked down. And you want to change the thoughts that are going to be triggered by those emotions. Once you get that pattern, that loop, when you break that loop and you move back up into your cerebral cortex, into your higher functioning brain, and even better into spirit, then you actually can start to take effective action. I'm going to give you one more key. And I mentioned this in my Facebook Live yesterday, and that's about trust. I mentioned that trust was really key to getting through your blocks, to moving forward. You need to trust yourself. So certainly if you're one of those people who blame yourself, if you can trust yourself, that you can trust that who you are is okay, that helps. And then you need to trust the universe. Now, if you were a other blamer, you might be blaming the outside world. I invite you to think in a different way, to think that in fact the world and everything that's happening is all happening for a reason. Ooh, that sounds a little Pollyanna-ish, doesn't it? Well, that is actually the way in which I look at the world. Now, in the moment, when you're caught up in those emotions, it's really hard to take that mindset. But when you get into that place of emotional hygiene, in that place of emotional balance, then you actually can take that attitude of seeing things from a larger perspective and then saying, okay, this too shall pass and I will be okay. Am I safe right now? So as I had said before, part of the problem is the early childhood patterns. And that ultimately is what you need to change. That's ultimately what you need to heal, is the emotional wound and then change the patterns. And that is going to take some work. And I generally invite you to get some counseling or support, because it's very difficult to see your blind spots. It's very difficult to see how your inner child, that old pattern, might actually be sabotaging you. But there's one other thing I want to point out, and that is that your life needs to be in balance, that you want all the various aspects of your life, your work, your health, and your relationships, and even the meaning in your life, to be all working in harmony. If you focus only on business, you're going to be neglecting certain parts of yourself, and that's going to put you out of balance. And that will cause the stress and strain in your life, whether you're on lockdown like you are right now, or regularly in your life. Ultimately, what we look for in life is a balance, so that we have everything in harmony, so that your relationship is supporting your work. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That your relationships are encouraging what you're doing, so that you feel empowered and you feel excited, and that your health is also, that you're not trashing your health by working too hard all the time. And that finally, that your work is meaningful to you, that you're not doing it just to make money, but that it is important to you. Now, I have to admit, this is important to me. That's part of who I am, is that my work needs to be meaningful to me. And I happen to believe that that is true of most human beings, although they don't recognize it. But the number one regret of the dying is not living a life true to yourself. And what does true to yourself mean? It means accepting who you are, who you really are, your authentic self. And we have learned very early in our lives to hide that part of ourselves in order to be safe, in order to get the basic human social needs that we needed as children to survive. So I hope you have found this useful. What do you want to take away from here today? Allow your emotions, change your thoughts, get back into your higher brain so that you can get into more effective action. If you want to know more about my work, come to the next speaking event, or check out my Facebook Live trainings, which a lot of them are going to be only in my group, which is Live Your Brilliance. And I hope you have a great day. That's all for now. Be brilliant.